Welcome to Entrepreneurship 101, Starting a Business in Fairfax County, Entrepreneur Spotlight. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. He grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, received his BS in Communications from the University of Denver, enlisted in the Marine Corps, where he attained the rank of lieutenant. He earned his MS degree in Communications from Northwestern University, where he later taught and served as an assistant dean. His first full-time entrepreneurial endeavor, Network Solutions, was a tremendous success in that he and his business partners commercialized the TCP IP protocol and went on to become the managers of the Domain Name System, or DNS, registry, granting the .com registrations. Mr. McHenry has since founded several other companies, including his current venture, Cycurion, which he co-founded with his partners, Kurt McHenry, his son, and Alvin McCoy, and currently serves as chairman and CEO. In addition to being a serial entrepreneur, Mr. McHenry is also a former FCEDA commissioner and a tech titan. Welcome to the stage, Mr. McHenry. Thank you for being here.
Well, I'm delighted to be with you. I've been listening to what folks have had to say, and I wish I'd had all that guidance when I first started as an entrepreneur. Well done, people. Very well done.
Thank you so much. So, Mr. McHenry, we have several viewers on today that are in all phases of the business life cycle, and you've done it not just once, but several times in starting a business. So, as a serial entrepreneur, how has the business landscape changed since you first started your business or the first company?
A significant piece of it, it's technology dominant. Most of us are finding ways to use technology differently or to create emerging technologies. In this region, when I started, there weren't investment bankers looking at Northern Virginia to invest in. Even when I went on the Economic Development Authority, we didn't have so much of that. I think you guys have been a part of attracting investors, but the big thing was the capital resources weren't here. But what was here was talented people, a government that needed technology, that needed services, that were looking for competitive pricing. So there were opportunities, but the big difference was the capital marketplace.
And so how did you raise funding then for your company? And do you feel it was more difficult when you first started out, or is it more difficult given today's environment?
Oh, it was more difficult when we started out.
Okay.
You say, we second mortgaged our homes. Some of us sold our homes for capital to grow the business. But if you believe in the idea and the plan begins to take root, then you make sacrifices. And so that's what we did.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what lessons then do you think are most important for a new entrepreneur to learn, and why?
That's a broad question. I think a lot of the things that Cindy talked about, some of what's going on here with some of the training facility. I think the big thing for an entrepreneur to deal with is, am I entrepreneur stuff? Am I willing to take risk? Do I have a fallback plan if my risk-taking fails? Am I in a network of relationships that are supportive of being an entrepreneur? Or in some cases, I hate to say this, relationships sabotage entrepreneurship. So I think that's the first thing. You've got to wrestle with yourself and what you're made of and what you really want. If you want to be an entrepreneur, quotes, just for making the money, I'd say that's the wrong model. I think sure, you want to be able to be successful financially, but it's an expression of self. Most entrepreneurs have a burning desire to create, to be a part of building something bigger than or different than what they've experienced to date. Look, I grew up in quote, an entrepreneurial family. The truth is, my grandfather, my father, my uncles, my granduncles, all had small businesses. But they had those small businesses not to grow them large, not seeing a huge, but it was freedom. It was a freedom from the control of others. The only control factors they dealt with was the client that they were providing a service to or providing a solution to. That's one aspect of the business. And that's what I kind of call the closed loop part of the business. There's another aspect that's much more open. And that is when you're in the business, but it's not just for that personal economic satisfaction, but you are driven by an idea, or you're driven to build something, or you have a vision that's just beyond yourself. And that's a larger play. And so people go through all of those are valid. It's just you need to understand who you are because it will control your risk. I remember having a dear friend who was more of a closed loop player, and he tried to jump into the open. And he just burned through lots of cash because the model was so different, and he didn't create the strategy to be in the more open, aggressive space for growth. So you really need to kind of measure yourself and where you stand with that.
And just to piggyback on the information that you shared about your friend and not having that strategy, is it in starting a business or even running an existing business to have a business plan to continuously update it?
Well, it's critical to start with a strong idea and a plan. And yet, you make a good point. You have to update. You have to be in the moment. You just can't drive down a road and the light goes dark on you and you say, I'm going to keep going down this road. You've got to have a way to keep your vision looking at options. I mean, I spend lots of time, even at this stage of my life, studying, reading, reviewing, trying to understand market trends, trying to understand who's creating what, who should I be looking for to partner with, what's the competition doing in the marketplace. So I think really being an entrepreneur is a life of study, a life of innovating yourself, trying to re-envision where you want to be and how you want to be there. And that's part of the planning process. I would also add, an entrepreneur has to ask the question. One of the things that was missing in the 10 points that Nick gave, I'd add one other thing, Nick, and that is, who are you going to partner with to build your business? Are they going to just be employees that you will attract? And what are you going to give them to make it meaningful for them to take the risk with you? Or is it going to be partners? And what do you know about those partners? I mean, it's one thing to go to a baseball game to have a beer with a person. It's another, getting into business with a person is more difficult than getting out of that business if things don't work can be more difficult than getting out of a marriage even. So you have to look at this almost like this is a form of marriage when you partner. But if you do the right kind of partnering and you create the right diversity, I mean intellectual diversity, I mean thought processes, I mean methods and tools, et cetera, then that is can be a very powerful foundation for growing a business. Lots of entrepreneurs, everyone talks about the entrepreneur. I dare say most successful entrepreneurs, you should be talking about the team and the team that they built and the people they attracted to get to where they want to go.
Interesting. So for viewers, for family-owned businesses, what has it been like working with your son, Kurt, and what are some of the best practices for hiring and working with family members?
Well, I've had many sides. I've had a sister's a PhD in engineering who was an engineer, but she didn't really trust people. And to be an entrepreneur, there needs to be, you got to trust but verify, but you got to start with the trust factor. So that didn't work out very well. And she recognized that and she started something of her own. I had a younger son who was with us for a while. He came to say, Dad, this isn't for me. And I was glad he did because I was about to say, this isn't for you. My son, Kurt, is different. It was unique. I mean, I remember when he was a child, at the dining table with my family, we talk about business. I talk about what I was doing. And of course, I gave the happy side of the business. I didn't say we're about to go broke tomorrow, that sort of thing. But one night I was sitting at the table and I said, we were talking, what's the challenge today, Dad? I said, well, I got to fire this guy. He just can't get the vision. And Kurt said, Dad, you want to fire him or are you going to ask for his resignation? Now, this is a business guy. He understands human resources. He understands people. The difference between firing and asking for a senior manager's resignation allows them to keep their self-respect. It makes it easier. Just that. So he has that knack. He has that understanding around people and people relationships. And before we became business partners, he worked other places. You know, he worked for AT&T and et cetera, et cetera. So he learned not just what Dad could share with him, but he went about learning what other people were doing and the methods and tools they used. And so when we became partners, he brought that into the business. But he wasn't a partner day one. He also, when he was in college, I think high school, I sent him to Oklahoma to work with our operation there, independent of me. I wasn't around. So he's had broad experience. He's a compliment to me. I'm overly optimistic. And he's the guy that says, Dad, think about this for a minute. You know, but that's what you want. You want a partner that can balance you out, because we all have leanings, and some of those leanings can get you into trouble. And so you need someone that can say, well, let's think about this a little different way. The biggest challenge I've ever had is when I had a board that didn't give me that kind of feedback for some crazy idea I had. So yeah, it's been easy. It's been easy. We have ultimate trust. So he can tell me things other people might not tell me. And that's always good. You know, if I cut somebody off too many times in a meeting, he's the guy that will say, Dad, you know, you cut him off a few too many times. You need to let him finish his idea. Or more importantly, he'll say, may I finish my idea? So that's all worked out well for us.
Okay. So it looks like I am getting the signal to wrap up this interview. But in the few minutes that we have remaining, if you wouldn't mind just sharing information about your entrepreneurial journey and just leaving our audience with some just tips for success.
Tips for success. Well, look, I have been an entrepreneur since I was a kid, and you know, paper route and all that jazz. But I think focus is a key. Be careful, don't get caught up trying to do too many things until you get a solid foundation. I think that's critical. In Cycurion, for example, we're a cybersecurity company, providing technology solutions, et cetera, et cetera. We often, in fact, earlier today, we came back and we're reviewing our plan. We're reviewing our strategy. We're looking at doing acquisitions. So we're looking at emerging technology, how that fits. And indeed, we're trying to see the quilt that we're trying to build of solutions that defines who we are, and who we are is a function of what our customers need in large measure. You know, so I think you got to understand your customers, really critical, understand what their needs are. If you're just starting out, be honest, you know, meet with folks, get to know the customer, tell them your story, but tell the story. You can't be everything. I often have seen people put out 10 factors or 5 or 8 factors of things they can do for a company. Well, you can't do all of those well when you're just starting out. Give me the 1 or 2 things you can do really well that differentiates you from folk. I think that's an important consideration.
Okay. And I certainly do want to thank you for your time today. It has been an amazing just opportunity to listen to your journey and to hear best practices and sage advice for viewers on how best to start a business, to run a business, and some of the things that they really need to be thinking about. We certainly do appreciate your time, Mr. McHenry.
I'd add a 30-second piece. Once you get your foundation, don't simply focus on the US. I mean, we've done business on 4 continents, found successes, but the same rules apply on all of those continents that apply here, other things I've said so far. So thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. And
Thank you.
thriving entrepreneurs the opportunity to really thrive. So take care.
Thank you so very much. I'd like to thank Mr. McHenry for being here today, and I'd like to thank all of our speakers. And